Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of This Week in Digital Health. We are here today with Cindi Williams of Quin. They are a startup that has developed an AI-driven app that helps people with diabetes better manage their care. So Cindi, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you. How long ago did you found the company?
We started Quin about 7 years ago now. So we've had quite a lot of twists and pivots and turns along the way. And we've kind of really in the last several months really started to take off and achieve the kind of engagement we're looking to achieve.
And what led you to found the company?
Well, so I don't know how familiar you are with diabetes and the challenges in the space, but 80% of people with diabetes actually are not able to achieve recommended medical targets. And they're 2 to 3 times more likely to have fatigue and anxiety and stress and depression. And underneath those statistics, as I have become aware over the last 7 years, is just a whole host of unmet self-management needs. So diabetes is a condition that's managed by the individual when they're away from their doctor, living their day-to-day life. That's where 99% of care happens. And that the needs of that care have really kind of gone really underserved by the medical community. And I learned that because I had a co-founder in Quin. She's now since gone on to do her PhD, so she's not working with the business anymore, but she's the one who kind of clued me into just, the hundreds of decisions a day that people are making to keep themselves alive and well, which decisions about things we really just take for granted. So things like, if I'm going to eat this food, how much insulin do I need to offset it? Is it safe for me to pick my kids up at the nursery? If I go into this client meeting, am I going to get a little bit loopy? Do I need to do something like eat some sugar before I do that? Just these kind of basic things, which, for those of us who aren't living with diabetes, just don't really worry about that much. And so I kind of got clued into this set of challenges and the need for just basic consumer technology to be used in a way that kind of helps to alleviate that load. And so that's kind of what we're doing at Quin is, taking data from diabetes devices and phones and using it to build up these complex, rich models of a personal behavior and physiology and psychology, and then using that to provide just really hyper-personalized education. So how does this drug, food, exercise that I'm putting into my body affect me? Support for picking people up when all the times when things go wrong. There are lots of things you do you have to correct 2 hours later. And so there's a lot of ups and downs in this world. And then also just guidance, decision-making guidance. So I mentioned 180 decisions a day people are making. So using people's personal past experiences to guide them to make decisions in the moment.
And are you trying to change behaviors?
Not in the kind of traditional way that people think about changing behavior in diabetes. So what we're looking to do is to basically to empower people with confidence and knowledge and better well-being so that they can get better health outcomes. And for us, what that means is hyper-personalized education, support, and guidance that provides insights for people based upon their own personal information and intrinsically motivates them to maybe do something a little bit differently. And so an example might be insulin stacking. So all of our users right now are people who take insulin to manage blood glucose, and insulin is a long-acting drug, anywhere from 5 to 24 hours, depending on what it is and what it's for. And it has acting phases and cycles. So it's going to kind of do nothing for a while after you take it. And then it's going to really, really, really lower your blood glucose. And then it's going to kind of start tailing off over time. And many people who take insulin for decades struggle with, they're too high. So they take insulin. They want their blood glucose to come down. And they do that and it doesn't have the desired effect. So they take the insulin, 30 minutes later, they're still high. They take more insulin, 30 minutes later, they're still high, and they take more. And then so there's a stacking effect. So you now have hours of insulin, and eventually you're going to crash really low, and then you're going to eat sugar to get back up. And then you're going to kind of be in this kind of yo-yo stage. And so the kinds of behaviors you might change because you're using Quin would be we would be giving you this insight of like, well, oh, stacking, and it looks like you might be stacking. Are you sure you want to take this next dose? If you do want to take this next dose, here's some pretty helpful, pretty relevant information about the how much you might take and how it might turn out based upon your personal past experiences. So it's all about, it's not an app that's telling you don't do this, don't eat that, only do it this way, check your blood sugar. It's an app that's basically observing and learning and using the information it has about you to empower you and give you confidence through just really personalized education, support, and guidance. And that's what's helping people get better health outcomes.
And so is the goal for greater adherence?
The goal for us is for people to have better well-being. And right now, so adherence isn't a word that we use. We would talk about engagement. That's okay. No. I mean, it's a common. Everyone in the health system does use that word, but
Right.
It's a bit of a adherence and compliance these are medical terms about getting people to do stuff. In our world, we talk about engagement. So engaging, if there's loads of research going back decades that says that if people engage with diabetes, they do better. So even if it's their doctor just calling them up every day and saying, hey, how's your diabetes? Hey, how's your diabetes? But that's not what, obviously that's not a sustainable solution. So what we're doing is actually helping people to engage with diabetes on their own terms. And through that, they're getting better health outcomes. So 96% of our users actually achieve improvements in well-being and health outcomes. 59% are actually achieving improvements in HbA1c and time in range, which are kind of the two key medical metrics that get tracked in our space. And 58% are reporting improvements in their well-being. And so for us, it's about treating diabetes distress, basically. So we think the medical industry, the clinical treatment model for diabetes is about chasing glycemic outcomes. So get good time in range, get good HbA1c, and people are given all kinds of tools and training and whatever else to really chase that. But as I mentioned up front, 80% of people do not achieve the recommended HbA1c target. So that's the kind of number that gets checked. That's a colossal number when you're talking about 500 million people. And so rather than you train people and teach people and go after people to help them chase glycemic outcomes, because what that has actually done is create something called diabetes distress. So this is now the diagnosed, clinically validated emotional response to all the things that go wrong when you have diabetes, basically, when you're treating diabetes. So these hundreds of decisions a day that you're making and all the different things that happen that make it very, very difficult. Diabetes distress leads to diabetes-related depression, which leads to diabetes burnout. And so what Quin does is actually treat that diabetes distress. So it's treating the challenges of the cognitive and psychological load that comes with managing diabetes. And then through that, our users are actually getting better health outcomes. So we're giving people confidence. We're giving them a sense of like, I got this, I can live life how I want to live it. And in doing that, that's through education, support, and guidance. And through that, then they're actually achieving better medical results.
And I'm guessing that stress just exasperates whatever challenges they're facing, with their health anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, mental health is health. So, it's a critical part, and particularly in diabetes. I mean, as I said, you're making 180 decisions a day. You're 2 to 3 times more likely to have fatigue and anxiety and stress and depression. I mean, this is a very challenging condition to live with day in and day out. And that is why we are going down this route of personalized education, support, and guidance. And it's all about empowering people with confidence and knowledge and better well-being, to get better health outcomes.
And the better health outcomes are, you said something like 80% don't achieve this. Do you move that needle, or where do you measure your success as a result of the app?
Yeah, we do. So we look at two things. So we certainly look at the health outcomes, and for us, it would be time and range. So many of our users are wearing a continuous glucose monitoring device, which is continuously measuring their blood glucose. And so we have that signal. So our real world evidence shows that people achieve 10 to 20% improvement in time and range if they're starting at less than 70%, and that's most people. So as I mentioned, that 80% don't achieve the outcomes. So it's a very large segment of the population. We can improve by 10 to 20% in time and range. And then we look also at a whole host of kind of mental well-being. The major one that we're really tracking right now is there's a diabetes distress scale. So this is a scale provided a validated scale that we use to kind of just consistently measure, month 1, 2, 3, 4 of using Quin, how are you doing? And are we able to move the needle on your well-being measures? And as I said, 58% of our users are actually seeing improvements.
And does this result in less acute care, or?
It can do. I mean, for us, and certainly if you're less distressed, you have the headspace to manage better. You do get better health outcomes, which means you spend less time out of range. So if you think there's a target blood glucose range, if you don't have diabetes, it just kind of runs along. If you do, it's going like that, and you got to take all kinds of actions to manage it. The acute care happens typically at the extremes of the high and the low range. And so the more we can help people to kind of get into that, closer to that range through relieving their distress, through relieving their, mental health and the wellness side of this, they actually do get better health outcomes. So yes, less hospital admissions, less time in hypo or hyper, which is the two kind of extremes in the spectrum, the less acute care you're going to have. And so the long answer to that, the short answer to that is yes, and the long answer to that is there's a lot of work still to be done. So we have a clinical study that's planned for early part of next year, the primary endpoint is time and range, so that I mentioned, and then we're also looking at hypo and time spent in hypo, time spent in hyper, as well as, of course, all of the quality of life factors and psychosocial functioning factors as well.
And is this the tool that's typically recommended by the care providers, or is this something that individuals seek out on their own? How did they come to become aware of you?
Yeah, right now they find out about us on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Apple search ads. So just kind of the typical ways that you would find out about any kind of consumer app. So people find us there, and then they come to the App Store and they download the app and start using. So the app is available free at the moment. We also have some influencers who, write about us and tell the world about us. So the kind of word of mouth kind of approach. And we do envision distribution through the healthcare system as well, as we kind of progress down the pathway. As I mentioned, we have a clinical study, which will then, provide the kind of validation that we're going to need to be able to do distribution through the existing healthcare system and the pathways there. And so it's really just anybody. I mean, doctors see it as clearly as we see it. People are managing their own condition. 99% of diabetes care is done by the individual away from the doctor. And so the doctors that we work with see the need for tools that actually provide education, support, and guidance that's hyper personalized to the individual. And so that's a big part of the reason we've kind of also been encouraged to go down this pathway, is working with our clinical advisory board and others sort of all down the line, and sort of identifying this truth across the industry, really, that it's the individual, it's the self-management load that we really need to address with better solutions. And so that's really a big part of what's driven us to set this up, is to just help people using their own data and their own information be more confident and be more empowered to manage better on their own. And obviously we're doing that through education, support, and guidance that's just really richly personalized to the individual.
And I know that apps for diabetes, that's a pretty crowded space. So how did you manage to sort of differentiate from all the other things that are out in the market? And is it and it's a two-part question, I guess. Is it also likely that people will use multiple apps, or is this a single solution?
Yeah, so there are thousands of apps for people with diabetes, and there are also dozens of what's called virtual care platforms in diabetes. And all of these solutions, the apps and the platforms, are really taking the traditional care model in diabetes, which is get good glycemic outcomes, get good time and range, get good HbA1c, and then putting kind of a digital layer on top of that. So they're helping people manage and monitor their blood glucose outcomes. So the difference between Quin and all of those other players is we're actually saying, yeah, that's very important to get good outcomes, but actually the way we're going about doing it, the tools we're giving to do it, is actually making it harder to get those outcomes. We have now created a world where people are 2 to 3 times more likely to have fatigue and anxiety and stress and depression. We have extreme load of diabetes distress in people even who are achieving those targets. And so by making solutions like we're making at Quin with personalized education support and guidance, that's how we're able to then treat diabetes distress so that people can get better diabetes outcomes. And so that's the fundamental difference between what we're doing at Quin and everyone else in the world. People do use multiple apps. They would prefer not to use multiple apps. And so, yeah, there's a lot of challenges out there about how we as innovators do better to integrate our solutions with each other. A big part of what we're doing at Quin is to integrate, and we're working to, and some of this is vision, but to bring some of the critical consumer health apps into our umbrella as a regulated medical device. So Quin is a medical device, so it's built with safety and all the concerns. I mean, people are, this is a serious condition people are living with, and we're in the decision-making loop around it. And so, but how can we integrate other consumer apps, health apps, into the self-management experience in areas which are relevant to managing blood glucose? And so that's a big part of our kind of future direction as well at Quin.
And this is for type 2?
Well, right now it's for people who take insulin, and that's all type 1s and some type 2.
Okay.
We have plans for next year to start working on a product that's more specifically focused on people who are taking oral medications. So not necessarily insulin, but other types of drugs for treating diabetes. And
so you've raised funds. This is so tell us what that was like, raising money for this. And I know that was a difficult process. It always is. So give us your story.
Yeah. It's definitely been, challenging, as it always is, I think, in an early stage business. So we raised over $5 million now in capital for the business. And the first chunk of that was friends and family. And then we've had kind of a group of sophisticated high net worth individuals who've now followed us through over a few smaller rounds. We also did a crowd round on Cedars we wanted to give our users and people with diabetes a chance to invest as well. And we've also got some UK government grant funding as well, some Innovate UK funding for quite a big chunk of our R&D in the earlier days. So we've been very fortunate. We have definitely been very supported by some people who really believe in our vision and the new future that we want to create for really empowering people and going after that diabetes distress challenge. So empowering people with personalized education support and guidance to be able to actually treat health outcomes. We've got investors who really have bought into that approach and bought into the progress that we're making, and the team that we have working on it. And so we've been well supported by the people who are close to what we're doing.
And is available in the UK market?
Yeah, we launched in the UK about a year ago now, and that's kind of been, and since then we've really been, well, leading up to our launch actually for a couple of years, we were working with hundreds of people with type 1 diabetes who are kind of helping, co-creating the app with us. And so really helping us to see kind of what's needed. And that's where we've gotten these deep insights around, actually, it's not about chasing blood glucose outcomes. It's much more about giving people headspace, treating diabetes distress to get better health outcomes. So that's kind of how we discovered this insight. And as we've been live now in the UK, we've kind of continued to see more and more. So it's kind of helped us really shape the product to what it is now. We've got very strong engagement rates now, and that's something that's not happened in diabetes. People have really struggled because they've looked at the problem through the healthcare system challenge. They've struggled to engage the individual. And so that's really where we focused, is how do we, through hyper-personalized education support and guidance, get people to really engage in a way that it's going to actually give them a lift in kind of offloading the cognitive and psychological work that's got to be done to live well with the condition. And so we have, that's kind of what our core focus has been. And through that, we're seeing that people are spending 15 days or more a month using our app. 20% of our users using the app 15 days or more a month, which is extraordinarily high engagement rate in health apps, and in diabetes apps it's mega extraordinarily high. So we're very proud of that, and that's now what's given us the lead to go ahead and start launching in the US. And so we've kind of just started our early market entry here. I'm actually in New York today as we speak, working on our US entry. And yeah, we're going to go for a much broader launch and rollout in the early part of next year.
So will you raise more money to do that rollout?
We will indeed. Yeah, we're raising capital now, in fact, which is also part of the reason I'm here in New York. Yeah, and so so we're raising 10 million US, and yeah, that's for a large chunk of that is for continued R&D in our type 1 product rollout in the US and some other Canada, Australia, New Zealand, so similar regulatory markets that are English speaking, and then yeah.
And did you go to the US because the capital will help you make the connections to roll out in the US, or did you go to the US because there's a different mindset when it comes to investing? Why US investors at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, well, number one, there's just way more capital in the US. So, I mean, this is a world area where 20 billion plus was done in the first, invested in the first 3 quarters of the year into digital health. So, there's just a lot more capital. There's certainly more of an appetite for investment in pre-revenue startups. So in the UK and Europe, it's challenging and people do it. And we are talking to European and UK investors, so it's not that we're definitely on both sides of the pond with it. But yeah, it is.
The EU investors tend to be more conservative and risk averse. So.
Yeah. So kind of for where we are in our life cycle and what we're aiming to do and the amount of capital that we need to do it, the US is just a really good fit for that. And that, as I said, that doesn't mean we won't necessarily won't raise in the UK or in Europe. It just we need to play all the options, and that's what we're doing.
And what has it been like as a female founder? We know that the numbers are not great when it comes to support for female founders. They get a very small percentage of venture capital, that type of thing. So what has it been like for you as a female founder to try to pull this off?
Well, I've never been a male founder, so I don't know what that would be like.
We'll give you that much, right?
But I mean, you're definitely aware of this is a 2.3% of venture capital went to women last year. So this is not when the odds are stacked in the other direction. And so yeah, I'm definitely aware of that, and I definitely feel that. I will say there are people out there who want to see those numbers change significantly, both men and women. And so you do see, I have personally been very supported by both men and women in terms of door opening and making connections and offers and frank feedback, which quite honestly is some of the most important thing you can do for a female any founder probably, but certainly for me as a female founder, getting really straight feedback from people about the proposition and how people see it has been, incredibly useful to me in terms of shaping and thinking about, how to position, how to present to whom, and, just being continuously, refining the focus on, who's this going to be right for, and, how to talk to them about it. But it's, it's hard, and I think raising capital is hard anyway. And I think the numbers tell you that it's harder for women. We're out here, we are. It's not because we're not here.
And how is your approach different when in the US market than it would be in the UK market? Are the users different?
Yeah. Right now we're in still quite a bit of a test and learn and research phase. And so, there's kind of the question of, is the product fit? And we believe very much that it is. And then there's the question of like, is the acquisition pathways that have worked for us in the UK, are they going to work here in the US? So talking about just particular audiences, messages, creatives, and finding the right combination of those things to be able to acquire users. And so there's a lot to be done, and we're kind of building it up slowly and learning and understanding. You can obviously blow a ton of money, trying to acquire and direct to consumer, particularly on these platforms. And so, really like being smart about it and just, testing and learning and building up as we go. It's we're 2-3 weeks now into our US entry, and so we're looking to by January kind of know enough to be able to drive downloads cost effectively at scale, and have the retention be what we need it to be, and we're very confident about that.
And will this ultimately be a reimbursable expense, folks, if it gets approved?
Yeah, so our business model right now is direct to consumer, and we have a strong conviction in a direct to consumer business model wherein people will pay out of pocket for it. We are also doing the things that we need to do to open up, unlock the B2B2C routes for what we're doing. And so, if we can present our, as I said, the industry and the medical profession actually sees the value in the unmet needs of self-management and the need for personalized education, support, and guidance. We definitely have, there's a strong conviction in the industry, everyone that I speak to, that says, yes, that's a novel take on the challenge. The challenge isn't just health outcomes. The challenge actually is diabetes distress. And there is a strong interest in our insight and our approach and the early results that we can show with 96% of people achieving improvements in health outcomes and quality of life. So there is a strong interest to distribute what we have through the channels. The challenge, or the kind of unlocking step for that, is of course a clinical study, which kind of provides the evidence that's needed to be able to distribute to those pathways and get reimbursement. And
yeah, but if you look at any chronic condition, there's always a comorbidity that it's going to have an underlying effect. And it typically, like you said, it's typically going to be around depression or something like that.
Yeah.
Because people, when they become depressed, don't take care of themselves the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that has been really our insight. We started Quin really looking at insulin dosing. The question of how much insulin should I take and when, and that's really not a question anyone can answer exactly. It's done through trial and error and experimentation and just a lot of ups and downs and things going wrong and guesswork. And so we started there, and then in solving that problem, or pieces of that problem, we started to realize, oh, the challenge is so much greater. The just really lack of access to education about all these things in diabetes. People maybe get some education when they first get diagnosed, but it's 20 years later. Do they remember it? Of course not. Or maybe they don't get any education at all, or they get insufficient education. So it's sort of to see the kind of the basic things we can do in putting the education in the right moment, in the right time for that specific individual on a topic that should be really relevant to them in that moment, and being able to give them that. And then also doing the like really actually working on the stress aspect of it, the diabetes distress. So there's so many ups and downs. It's so easy to, as you mentioned with depression, it's so easy to check out because it's just like so many things are going wrong all the time. And so really treating that gap in education, treating that distress, that stress, the depression, is actually a much bigger piece of the problem than just, or it's a very important piece of the problem, I guess, that needs to be solved. And so in landing on that problem statement, that's kind of what's allowed us to then be able to really produce just really personalized, hyper-personalized education, support, and guidance based upon that individual's personal past experiences. So not general medical knowledge with kind of your data filled in around the edges, but literally for you, this should be relevant for you right now. And here's a consumable, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes bit of information that should help you before you make this next decision that you're about to make.
And so one of the challenges is this is a condition that people have to manage daily. So you can't take 2 weeks off without impacting your health.
Yeah. So it's a 24/7, condition, and it's always there and it's always with you. And some days are better than others, but it's an incredible challenge to manage. And, anything that we can do to really help to take off this load of, 180 decisions a day and quite a lot of them going wrong. Just to treat that aspect of the condition. And then, through that, as I say, get people, people do achieve better health outcomes.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier that, there's been a ton of money that's going into digital health, going into digital therapeutics. This will obviously result in sort of a glut of products in the market. How do you think that will this consolidate, especially around the diabetes products? What's your sense of that as the market moves forward?
Yeah, definitely. Particularly in the virtual care world, there will be a consolidation, and probably within the next 3 to 5 years. And there'll be, I couldn't begin to pick the winners at this point, but there's dozens of platforms out there that are all kind of roughly aiming to do the same thing, take a lot of cost out, to take a lot of inefficiency out of the system, And they do aim to improve health outcomes for people with diabetes as well. And so that is definitely an area that's going to be ripe for consolidation at some point. And I think for us at Quin, because we're doing something that's so different from that, we're really actually working on the self-management, the unmet needs of the 99% of care, as opposed to the 1% of care that is in the hospital kind of clinic setting, time you spend with your doctor. We see, a great opportunity actually to be distributed through or partnered with in some way whoever the winners are in that space, because that self-management challenge is actually there regardless of what you do in terms of streamlining workflows with doctors and coaches and educators and all of that. So it's sort of we see what we're doing, because it's focused on the unmet self-management needs, really being a part of whatever solution kind of shakes out in the virtual care world, whichever whoever the winners end up being.
And have you had any dialogue with the farmers?
Yeah, we have conversations with the major medical device makers in the space, as well as the pharma. And those could be interesting pathways for us at some point in terms of distribution and reimbursement. So Quin, alongside an insulin pen, Quin alongside a continuous glucose monitoring device, those sorts of things. So Quin is effectively a new layer of kind of personalization and effectiveness on top of all the other, diabetes technology solutions that are out there. And we can certainly see ourselves playing with any of those.
Yeah, because we see a lot of the farmers being interested in these products because, at the risk of using the word you don't use, but greater adherence to, to their protocols means that there's better outcomes typically.
Yeah.
So, we see that pharma has a genuine interest in these types of products because, people do better overall. So it's attributed to your device, but it's also attributed to, better medication adherence and things like that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And so where can people learn more if they're interested in this?
Well, you can look at our website, which is www.quintech.io.
And that'll be below, so you can find that below.
Yeah, okay. And then, and then all of our social channels, we're Quin Diabetes app. So we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, TikTok, all the places you would expect us to be, Facebook. And so, you can come and see there. We have users, we have lots and lots of people engaged, very high engagement rate, people telling us just, how much of a game changer Quin has been for them and how much more confident they're feeling with managing diabetes and how much it's helped them to really just understand themselves and understand diabetes better and make life better. And so you'll see that when you go to our social channels and our website, you'll see that all over the place. Something we're very proud of.
Well, we very much appreciate your time today, and we will make some of those notes in below so that people can find you and check out your different channels. We appreciate you talking. Enjoy New York. You gone to Rockefeller Center yet and so seen the tree?
No, actually, it was too crowded. I was by there the other night, but it was just too busy. So we'll go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, we look forward to great things with you and have a great 2022. It sounds like you got a busy year ahead of you.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care.